Grüß, willkommen in einem aufregendes video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 18 of my Star Trek, the original series episode breakdown video series. In this video I'll be looking at season 5, or actually season 1 or 2 of the animated series, episodes 98 to 103 of Star Trek, to identify historical references which can be used to determine the original history of the Star Trek universe. Star Trek the animated series consists of 22 episodes, which is similar in number to each of the previous 3 seasons of Star Trek the original series. All episodes could, in theory, fit into a single season 4 series, which was my original thought. On the other hand, the animated series did have technically 2 seasons, so I will remain with that structure. In order to understand the development of the history or vision of Star Trek, we need to study the episodes in the order they were written. While I'm uncertain of the exact writing order, the production order is about as close as I can confirm. The episode order information as broadcast is also included. Special thanks to the transcripts which can be found on the Chakotay site. When Gene Roddenberry first created Star Trek back in 1966, he had a vision which remained basically consistent for the following 5 years. When The Next Generation was released in 1987, Gene's vision had changed and the past needed to change in order to be consistent with this new vision. This video series will look at the original vision of Star Trek, starting with the earlier source material. Any historical facts from later sources which contradict the earlier references will assume to be an error for the purpose of this video series. Minor changes in nomenclature can be excused. Bem is the second episode of Season 5, which is the second season of the animated series. By convention, it was considered the 98th episode produced. Its stardate is 7403.6 and its original air date was 14th of September 1974. Surprise, surprise, in this episode we discover a new planet. Pandro is a recently discovered planet with an alien species on it. The Enterprise decides to explore another recently discovered planet, in this case Delta Theta 3. The planet has some aborigines inhabiting it, which are lizard-like. There is some form of superior life form which looks after the planet, calling the aborigines its children. The Federation quarantines the planet. The key takeaways from this episode is the Federation has discovered a rather annoying alien race on the planet Pandro. It's likely not a Federation planet, but has some form of diplomatic relations, and there is some form of personal exchange between it and the Federation. The Enterprise has explored another planet, Delta Theta 3, which is inhabited by a primitive race which is looked after by the Entity, a superior being of some description. The planet may be in Federation space, but it's not a Federation planet and is quarantined. Albatross is the 4th episode of Season 5, which is the second season of the animated series. By convention, it was considered the 99th episode produced. Its star date is 5275.6 and its original air date was the 28th of September 1974. In this episode, the Enterprise is delivering medical supplies to the planet Dramia, which is remote and alien. It must be a Federation member as it is following Federation laws, but likely does not interact very much with other Federation planets. In the episode, we discovered that McCoy was on Dramia 19 years prior, which would make it 2249 AD. There is also a Dramia 2 in this system. It must be in a different system, as the Enterprise takes 4 hours to travel there and goes back using Warp 6, which sounds a little bit odd, but anyway, let's just go with that. It has a very small population. The key takeaways from this episode is we discovered 2 planets. The first Dramia hosts, or the first planet, Dramia, hosts a large civilization on it with lots of people. It is alien and a Federation member. The second, Dramia 2, is a significant distance away, possibly in a binary system orbiting a different sun. Its population is very small, 300 at the time of the plague and only 1 in current times. McCoy was at Dramia 2 19 years ago. The Pirates of Orion is the first episode of Season 5, which is the second season in the animated series. It was the 100th episode produced. Its stardate is 6334.1. Its original air date was 7th of September 1974. In this episode, another planet is mentioned, in this case Deneb 5. This was also mentioned back in Season 2, Episode 8. Back in Season 2, it seemed that Deneb 5 hosted an alien civilization. We also get a second planet, in this case Beta Canopus. Beta Canopus is a source of a critical drug which will save Spock's life. It must be a Federation planet and have a reasonable population on it. It's unknown if it's alien or not. I'm not going to make a wild guess, or I'm going to have to make a wild guess and assume it's human, but this could very well be very wrong. The starship Potemkin is mentioned in this episode. This is a starship and is a sister ship to the Enterprise. It was also mentioned in Season 2, Episode 24 and Season 3, Episode 24. We got another spacecraft mentioned, in this case the SS Huron. The SS Huron, according to Memory Alpha, is a freighter under the command of Captain O'Shea. The Orions are also mentioned in this episode. The Orions are still conducting space piracy, and their neutrality will likely end as a result of this particular piece of piracy. The key takeaways from this episode is that we get a mention of a number of old and new planets such as Deneb 5 and Beta Canopus. The starship Potemkin and the freighter SS Huron is also mentioned. Finally, we once again meet the Orions. The Practical Joker is the third episode of Season 5. It was the 101st episode produced. Its stardate is 3183.3 and its original air date was the 21st of September 1974. In this episode, we discover the Enterprise has a recreation room, or rec room, and it is a holodeck. This is the first example of a holodeck in Star Trek, although I'm uncertain if it's called that in this actual series. In the animated series, it's called a recreation room, but really does act identically to the later holodeck that we normally come across in The Next Generation. The key takeaway from this episode is the Enterprise has a recreation room which works very much like a holodeck. How Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth is the fifth episode of Season 5, and which is the second season of the animated series. It was the 102nd season or episode produced. Its stardate is 6063.4 and its original air date was 5th of October 1974. In this episode, the Enterprise meets an alien spacecraft which is in the shape of a winged feather serpent, or what later we discover is Kukulkan. We discover that the only inhabitant of this spacecraft is an alien individual which visited Earth in the past and influenced its inhabitants in some way, shape or form. The origin of this myth, or the myth of Kukulkan, comes around about 250 AD, earliest case. So the alien must have visited Earth around about 250 AD. We discover that the individual in the spacecraft, Kukulkan, leaves Earth after he teaches the inhabitants. He must have left before the Europeans arrived because he was in South America. So if he arrives in 250 AD, I would expect he would probably leave 100 years later in 350 AD. But anyway, it certainly occurred before Westerners arrived in South America or Central America. We discover that Kukulkan's race was destroyed before fire was discovered by humans. Humans discovered fire about 2 million years ago, so this race self-destructed or was destroyed about 2 million BC. Starbase 21 is mentioned in this episode. This is a new starbase. Just to remind viewers, a starbase is an inhabited planet surrounded by various orbiting objects. It is not a space station in space by itself. Key takeaways from this episode is that we discover the Mayan god Kukulkan visited Earth between 250 and 350 AD and taught the inhabitants something. He may have come over earlier and influenced Europe as well. If so, he may have arrived a lot earlier as a result, but the alien does not say he tried an experiment to teach the people of Earth, so, at that time, or at least he said that he only tried it once. So I suspect that this was the first time, which is in Central South America between 250 and 350 AD. Spock, on the other hand, does say an alien came to Vulcan and taught them as well. So I'm uncertain what the difference is. Perhaps with the Vulcans, he dropped by and simply exchanged information. With the humans, he performed a more extensive experiment in order to direct civilization in a specific direction. Starbase 21 is also mentioned in this episode. The Counterclock Incident is the 6th episode of Season 5, which is the 2nd season of the animated series. It was the 103rd episode produced. Its star date is 6770.3 and its original air date was 12th of October 1974. In the episode, Babel is mentioned. This is mentioned for the second time. Babel is a neutral diplomatic planet used for meetings. Capella 4 is also mentioned for a second time. It's inhabited by primitive, non-technological aliens. During the episode, the Enterprise interferes with an alien ship and is sucked into a reverse galaxy as a result. Time is moving backward in this galaxy. There is a planet in the reverse galaxy called Arat. Arat is an inhabited planet. The key takeaways from this episode is we discover a reverse universe or galaxy. It's not very helpful as a guide for the Star Trek timeline, but is of interest. Several planets are mentioned for the second time during this episode as well. This is the last episode that will be covered in this series. Following videos will be basically a timeline set of videos based on all this information. However, just going back to the animated series, some of the facts are puzzling based on the animated series, such as Spock's age. I always expected him to be older than Kirk, yet in the animated series he is younger. It is possible when the number of years were mentioned, the assumption was this was the first year of the 5-year mission, in which case Spock would be older by 3 years, but I don't think that's the case. Memory Alpha claims he was born in 2230 AD, which would make Spock 17 years of age when he joined Starfleet. I feel this is young, but it's possible and lies with my analysis of the animated series. So that was an interesting fact that surprised me during doing this analysis. There were some facts which did cause some concern. The introduction of the slavers and Kanins did concern me initially, but while this bears similarity with the Larry Niven short stories, there are a lot of differences, so I have to assume only the ideas compatible with Star Trek are used in this episode in the animated series. In the animated series, we get no information about the slavers at all, so we can modify the past in any way that fits in with Star Trek, which probably was the intention. Even the Kins can be merged in the Star Trek universe by assuming they were a small, annoyingly aggressive race which Earth had to pacify before they got into their big war with the Romulans. The Vidala are also another concern I had with the animated series, as this was supposed to be a very powerful race and was the oldest spacefaring race known by the Federation. I would suspect while this race could be the oldest known spacefaring race in contact with the Federation at this point in time, their overall power could not be that great. They likely became pacifists and attempted to pacify a few planets around them, including the Score, but were not that powerful compared with the Federation. As for their appearance, it's unlikely they are related to the Kins. The animators probably could not be bothered to create a new character and just simply use the Kins sort of image, etc. Many of the latter Star Trek movies and shows do not align with the original vision of the series. This is common in real history, as later historians attempt to change the past to justify their new beliefs in the present. As I personally enjoy the original vision of Star Trek, I would hope future TV shows and movies would go back to its original roots, but I doubt that will ever occur. And so this concludes episode 18 of my Star Trek, the original series episode breakdown video series. My next series of videos will be a detailed breakdown of the timeline of Star Trek's the original series, using the information I have extracted from studying the scripts of all the related Star Trek, the original series and the animated series episodes. Alle guten Dinge, kommen zu einem Ende.